I'm Josh Cooperman, and this is Convo by Design, with a conversation about fame, design, architecture, and that which is truly important. I sought out Erin Ellwood after learning about her father, Craig Ellwood, architect, behind the Zimmerman House. Said house was recently demolished at the hands of actor Chris Pratt and his wife, Katherine Schwarzenegger. You know, we've talked about this already in a previous episode, actually a couple of them, and the following conversation isn't really about saving iconic design. We touch on the subject, but this is really about Erin's journey, of which her father's architecture is a large part, as is the work of her mother, Gloria Henry, an actress with an incredible career spanning from the earliest I found was 1947 through appearances on Parks and Recreation as recently as 2012. By the way, that featured, any guesses? Yes, Chris Pratt. So it all comes full circle, doesn't it? Erin's story is an amazing journey of self-discovery and expression, lessons learned and applied. And you're going to hear all about it right after this. I am just incredibly proud of this partnership I've got with Thermosol. They have been presenting partners of Convo by Design going on 5 years now. And there is a certain amount of pride that comes with saying that the show is presented by the company that is the best in the world at what they do. Thermosol engineers the most exceptional smart shower products and steam shower systems worldwide, full stop. And it's for a few reasons. First of all, they were the first company to design and patent the technology here in the United States, dating back to 1958. Thermosol, a U.S.-based manufacturer based in Round Rock, Texas, employs an engineering team that designs, tests, and continuously refines the product. Their quality control team tests every single steam generator before it departs the factory. Who else does that? Nobody that I know of. I have the pleasure of working with some world-class designers and architects who tell me, and if you're in the business, you know this, that the idea of luxury has changed, especially when clients want a spa-like bathroom. Steam is mandatory, or it's just not considered a luxury. And if you want to add steam, you have only one true option, my opinion, and that's Thermosol. Mitch Altman, third generation CEO of this family-owned company of 65 years, continues to innovate in the bathroom and shower space through technological marvels such as intelligent showering systems, sound therapy, aromatherapy, technical interfaces, and so much more. And now Thermosol, the industry leader in steam bath equipment and technology since 1958, as I mentioned, is enhancing its already stellar family of products with the new indoor and outdoor luxury saunas, available in 3 designs. The configurations are absolutely amazing, and you should probably go check them out. Indoor and outdoor options. It's amazing. You really do need to check them out. Go to thermosol.com or at Thermosol on the socials. So, Erin, I reached out to you, and you graciously took the call and said yes, you'd come on the show, and I'm thrilled that you are. I reached out to you initially because of your background. Now, one of the things that I love to do is explore the origin stories of the creatives and creators that come on the show. Yours is amazing. I wanna actually touch base on the reason why I reached out to you in the first place. But then I went down this rabbit hole of exploring your work, and it's like, this is amazing. And I saw connections in your work, at least I believe, to your father. But I wanted to start off with the origin story. Tell me the origin story. Tell me about your dad. Tell me how you got into this business and why.
Okay. Well, my father was the mid-century architect, mid-century modern architect, Craig Ellwood. Um, and So obviously I grew up in a very colorful world. My mother was an actress. She played the mother on Dennis the Menace, for around 4 years back in the 50s. She was also, before that, she was under contract at Columbia, and did about 30 to 40 B movies. So I grew up in a very, two people that succeeded very well in very creative worlds. So that's an unusual thing. I realize now, I look back and think, wow, how fortunate I was to be in such a creative environment and, not really understanding it at the time. But of course, now I understand it very much. And, and then I eventually got into set design, which was through an introduction with my father. A friend of his was an art director in television commercials. And so I ended up in that career for over 20 years. I production designed mostly television commercials, and which is a very creative, wonderful thing and very fast moving, very different from the world I'm in now. Commercials are designed, built, shot, and torn down in a matter of, a week to a couple of weeks. And this is a very different world I'm in. So it's funny, somebody pointed out later, after I had been doing this for quite a while, that I had merged both of my parents' careers, and I didn't even realize that. My mother was in film, my father was an architect, and here I am designing in film. So I thought that was interesting. I never even connected those dots. So yeah, I did that for over 20 years. Then I decided to adopt a child and realized I didn't want to raise her in LA. So I moved to Ojai and took some time off. Inging, that's what I called it. I was hiking, swimming, cooking, reading, actually recorded a kids album. I just I just lived. I decided I'm going to take some time off. I'd been working so hard all my life. So I took some time off um and was very available to my daughter during what I feel are incredibly important years. And then I realized I better get back in the game. And the only thing I could figure out that these skills could could fall into was interior design, which I had done here and there anyway. So yeah, so then I started in interior design. I actually started something that I called the Lone Arranger. This is how this is how I launched myself into it, because I would always help my friends like totally rearrange the room, and I had done that once. And my friend Corey said, "Why don't you just do this?" And I said, "Well, I do it. I do it all the time." And she goes, "No, but I mean charge for it." And I was like, "It's an interesting idea." And then I was hiking, and I came up with this name because I always felt kind of weird about my name, and I didn't like to, I don't know, I didn't want to. I wanted to come up with something that wasn't my name. And I just thought of the Lone Ranger. I thought that was kind of funny, and it took the edge off hiring someone like me, because hiring an interior designer sounds scary financially. And so I wanted something that was like user friendly and had a little comedic twist to it. So I came up with the Lone Ranger and started out just rearranging a room for $100. And that just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And now, 12 years later, I'm doing major renovations, ground up houses. And yeah, it took about 10 years to get off the ground. So yeah, I started a second career in my 50s. So that's kind of how I got here.
How fascinating the journey. And I love that. And I'm curious, sort of a couple of things. Having two parents who are both exceptional at what they do at the highest level, did that put any pressure on you to be creative, or did that give you sort of a comfort level that it's in your genes, you're capable of it, it's a matter of going out and manifesting it and making it real?
That's a really good question. I think when you're young, you don't connect those dots. I don't think, oh, wow, there's a lot of pressure on me. I think if anything, I thought, well, wonderful things will just come my way so easily. And they didn't necessarily. I learned that I actually really had to work, and have chops and prove myself. I can't just get things handed to me on a platter. I think maybe I thought that life would be kind of like that, but I didn't feel pressure. And I have to say, my parents were, very open to anything I was interested in. For a while, I was interested in psychology. I went into different things and they were always just very supportive of me and just the most important thing to them is I want you to be happy and I want you to do something that is intrinsic inside of you, and that's if that's what speaks to you, go for it. They were very supportive that way. So I didn't feel pressure, and and it wasn't like it's a strange thing when you're like in a market and somebody's going, "Oh my God, that's Dennis the Menace's mother." And the thing is, you don't realize it's unusual. You think everyone's mothers are recognized in a market. You know what I mean? Like you don't yet get how unusual that is until later and go, wow, that was kind of crazy that my parents were also very physically beautiful. My father was incredibly handsome and my mom was beautiful, and they were just a striking couple. So they got a lot of attention wherever they went. I think if anything, it's very funny because I'm a very shy person in general. I'm not showy. I'm not super into fashion. So I don't need to be noticed that way. And I feel like they kind of both were that way. They were hard not to notice. Let me put it that way. So I think if anything, that was kind of intimidating for me because I was more of an introvert.
Interesting. And I imagine growing up in that household with those parents, being an introvert was probably a very challenging and difficult thing to do.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in hindsight, I could see how I feel like I was a very insecure person.
Mm.
I see that now after raising my daughter, who's 21 now and seems very secure. And I look at her and I think, I was so not like this at her age. I was much more insecure. It took me a long time to build that myself. I have it now, but it took decades. I had to build that up my own way. But yeah, I think it made me kind of insecure.
Well, interestingly enough, looking at your work, one cannot tell by the nature of your work, and I love your work. Looking at it now, one of the things that uh, I like to try to break down the work of a creative to see if I can find any through lines or anything, because, and I've said this story 100 times, but um, when I started doing this podcast, I would ask designers just out of curiosity, like, so what's your personal style? What's your favorite style? And I have learned, um, I went through this phase, like, 5 years in, I would look back at some of those episodes and re-listen and just be like, oh, that's such a cringy question because, every good creative knows that it doesn't matter what their style is unless they're designing for themselves. It's important what their client's style is because that's what great designers do is they draw out those preferences and that uniqueness and then they reapply it with their craft. With your work, I feel like I can see a tableau, a creative structure that is very reminiscent to how I've talked to set decorators in the past. Because I love talking to set decorators. I love what they do. I love the art department. I love how they can take an idea from a written page, the written word, and then create a real space from that exemplifies the characters and the way that the characters live. I think that that's extraordinary, and I don't think that gets applied enough in real design work. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
And then the other side of that is I see a great deal of mid-century modern influence
Mhm.
in your work. Do you think that came from a love of being on a job site or your father's work? Do you think that that's something that you innately were drawn to?
So it's a good question. So, I started as a set decorator and then I went into art direction and production design. So, yeah, what I loved about that, I mean, at least my version of it, is I would have to build a backstory for a client for a project. I wouldn't, they'd say the set is a 12-year-old girl's room. Well, I wouldn't just do a room. I would create who she was. I would say she was into horseback riding. I would assign a world for her so that in the decorating of it, she had some point of view. She had some personality. So I learned that early on, and that's been a great thing to carry over into interior design. I very much want to bring the people I'm working with into this. And sometimes they know themselves really well and they're very clear with who they are, and it's an easy thread to follow. And sometimes they have no idea. They don't really know what they like until they see it. So, and I think, of course, I was influenced by that world, and I think the thing that influenced me more than anything is just minimalism. I think most people have way too much stuff, period. Often, what I do is I take away. When I was doing the, lone arranger, changing people's rooms around, and what I would do is I'd take like half the stuff out and then maybe get them a new chair or desk, get a couple of new things. But really, what I learned, it was about pulling away. And that is, if you look at my work on my site, you'll see even in the very traditional stuff, it's very minimal. I have to, people are used to putting a couch behind a sofa. And what do we do in this corner? If there's an empty corner, what do I put there? And I'll say nothing. Because to me, the negative space is just as important as the positive space. What you don't do is almost more important than what you do do. So I think that's the thread in my work is minimalism. I just think people have too much stuff. You don't need that much stuff. And when your house is full of things you don't even use, I think that's crazy. I just think it's a time where, I believe in comfort. I like efficiency. I don't like to waste. I don't like to buy things just because they look good. I like to create a story for them. And I really interview people, do you have children? Do you have dogs? What's going to happen in this room? Is this a room you want to come and chill out in? Is this a room you want to be invigorated in? I'd like to get very emotional about it, because that's what drives me. I have to have, there's a lot of undercurrents. I'm inspired by everything, mostly music, poetry, everything that has nothing to do with design. That's what inspires me. All those things come into play. So, I like to know what people listen to. What is their kind of, are they jazz into jazz? I mean, that does affect an environment. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I would say the answer to your question is I was very inspired by my background. And I think more than anything, it was the minimalist part of it. My father was quite a minimalist, and that's hence the minimalism bitch quote on my website. It's just like
It's
simplify. You don't need, it's so interesting because so many technologies have changed over the last many decades of our lives, but the way we live hasn't really changed. And I do think that's what mid-century modernism was about. It was really changing the way we live. We don't need such big places. They can be smaller, and let's blend the outside and the inside. I think that's why people have asked me, why do you think so many people are so obsessed with it? And I think that's it. It was a very different way to live. And rather than just normal houses with normal windows, with huge curb appeal, yards that are huge in the front that nobody uses. What's the
right.
point of that?
It's funny that you brought up the minimalism bench post, because that was one of the things that I just totally grabbed my attention. I was like, oh, I've got to ask about this. And it's funny to me that it's not lost on me that, and I'm not calling you out at all. I think it says something really, really important that we're talking about minimalism and your philosophy on minimalism. And you and I are doing this by the miracle of Zoom. And I can see the hundreds of books behind
Mm,
you. And what that tells me from this conversation is, the same way that you said you talk to your clients and you understand what's important to them. What do they listen to? What do they read? What do they do? That this quest for knowledge, this interest in books and what you can glean from them is very, very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Totally.
and I think that books are very similar, personal opinion, to architecture and design, not the other way around. I think it's, we've kind of gotten into this culture where there's great design and then you take pretty pictures of it and you put it in a magazine or you put it in books, and then there it is, and that's the extent of it. I think what's lost in that is the experiential value of architecture and design. And I think that that's one of the things that was so important to mid-century modern design and architecture, was that it became all about the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Almost because of the minimalist nature and the clean lines, it was almost more about the experience than it was about the work itself.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've ever lived in one or spent some time in one, but it's a very different way of living. It actually changes the trajectory of your life, I believe. It's expansive. I mean, what I realized recently, I was watching, I made a film with my mother in one of my father's houses several years ago. And what I realized, because the whole house was glass, it's the Smith house up in Brentwood, and which is for sale again. And it's just a floating glass box in the sky. And I was watching it thinking, I grew up in this world of no boundaries. Like there were no boundaries between the inside and the out. It's a very different way to live from traditional living.
You are listening to my conversation with Erin Ellwood. We'll be right back. As a busy professional designer, you know how important it is to find the right partnerships. Partnerships that allow you to specify the right products for every project. Professionals like you don't just have time to sit around and waste, right? So let me tell you about one of my partnerships. Pacific Sales is here to serve you with expert, knowledgeable, and non-commissioned professionals to help you specify the right product for all your projects. Non-commissioned. That means their only incentive is your satisfaction. Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, has just that, with over 60 years of service in Southern California. Pacific Sales is your destination for exploration, advice, and inspiration. And you will find all your favorite brands, like Monogram, and their commitment to providing exceptional products, starting with materials. Monogram sources commercial-grade stainless steel on their refrigerators, unscratchable sapphire glass on their cooktop knobs, durable marine-grade bearings on their dishwasher racks. Monogram takes inspiration from the leading-edge materials used in the high-end automotive and aeronautics industry to provide you with lasting beauty and exceptional quality. The beauty is backed by the same level of attention to performance, which is why Monogram appliances are trusted and sought after by chefs all over the country. Chain-driven French oven doors that can be opened with one hand, and an industry-exclusive hearth oven that allows for all-electric indoor brick oven-style cooking without the need for external ventilation. These are just a few of the things that make Monogram so special. Pacific Sales features Monogram appliances, and Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home team is here to help you and offer their Pro Rewards program, which is a trade program unlike any you have experienced before. And here's the cherry on top: access. Access to exclusive builder trade incentives from top brands like Monogram. Visit a Pacific Sales showroom today to learn how you can unlock additional savings and benefits. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with the best of the best. Visit Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home today and elevate your projects to new heights. Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, where excellence meets expertise. Man, I love this. I have a new sponsor partner on the show that I want to introduce you to if you're not already familiar with them. If you are a specifying designer, architect, landscape architect, or savvy design enthusiast, if you have heard about the quiet luxury movement, this idea of crafting a lifestyle around understated elegance, simplicity, and sophistication, there's more to it than that. And I will add uncomplicated living. Isn't that what we all strive for? I am extremely happy. I'm really thrilled to share a company that embodies all of this, utilizing proprietary technology and a focus on sustainability in their stunningly beautiful products. It's TimberTech. TimberTech is the premium decking company delivering multi-tonal, color blending, and natural wood textures in a product that is virtually indistinguishable from a natural wood product. What does this mean? It means it's everything wood should be, a beautiful look that blends seamlessly with a well designed space, providing years of enjoyment and performs the way you want it to. No splintering, fading, peeling, cracking, or rotting. I had a wood deck at our Manhattan Beach home, and I got to tell you, it was exasperating every year doing the random board flip, taking out nails, resetting them, restaining them. It was a complete pain. It was complicated, and I didn't look forward to it. I wish I had TimberTech because TimberTech is not only uncomplicated, it's beautiful. It comes in over 20 finish options and 9 collections, and 85% of the material is recycled. This is premium decking for your next project. Learn more and specify it for your next design project. TimberTech on the socials or timbertech.com, where you can find a retailer near you, as well as a number of tools to create, design, order samples, and get the expert help you may need. TimberTech is uncomplicated luxury and performs. It's your choice for your next deck project. You mentioned the Smith House and that it's for sale again, and I think that that actually is a great place for us to make a sharp right and talk about how you and I actually met and why I reached out to you. So the Smith House for sale. Let's hope that it doesn't meet the same fate as the Zimmerman House.
It won't.
You say that. You say that, and I'm inclined to believe you. At the same time, this idea of destroying historically significant properties. I mean, prior to the Zimmerman House going down at the hands of the Pratt Schwarzenegger group,
Yeah.
there was 1001 North Roxbury, which on an exceptional piece of land, on an exceptional street, an iconic street, where you had Lucille Ball living on one side, Jack Benny on the other, Esther Williams swimming in the pool. It was published in Arc Digest. It was published in Lux, and it still got torn down.
Yeah.
It was bought for $49 million as a teardown for a
Wow.
2-acre parcel of land.
That's
So,
crazy.
in my opinion, humble opinion, I don't know everything. I'm the first to admit that, but I don't think anything is safe.
Well, you're probably right. It's a difficult subject, and you get so, I thought so many people asked me what I thought of the Zimmerman House, and quite frankly, I believe it was the first or second house he ever designed. It wasn't great. I don't think he was proud of it. I've wondered if he was alive, would he tear it down? So there's that. I mean, if it was the Rosen house or the Hunt house or the Kuderna house or the Smith house, I would be devastated. But this wasn't one of the amazing examples of his genius. It just wasn't. So I think the hardest part of it for me, I feel like in this day and age, I mean, we're living in incredibly difficult times, painful times, politically, in just every way. And kindness needs to be an important part of our lives, I feel. And the general way that I live is, um, if I'm going to take something away, I'm going to give something back. Just period, the end. It just should just be how we're all living. Everything should be a win-win as much as you can. And there are so many things they could have done to give back. So that's more hurtful to me. The fact that it was torn down isn't devastating. It wasn't absolutely fabulous, and it wasn't in great condition. It wasn't one of the really well restored ones. And restoring those houses is a fortune. I know people that have done it. It is a very costly endeavor. And by that time, you could have torn it down and built something else in many cases. So there's that, so I don't know. I see all sides of it. I'm not one of those diehard, like he did an absolutely horrible thing. I don't really believe that. I just think, wow, you couldn't have done something creative with that, called the LA Conservancy, and could part of it have been saved? Could it have been moved somewhere? Could he have invited architecture students to come see it? Could he have donated to George Smart's US Modernists? Somebody who's working so hard at archiving all of these houses. Do something, give something back. That's all. That's to me is the most painful part of it.
So it's really interesting. And Erin, I love your approach. I feel very much the same way you do, a little different. For me, like I said, I did a two-part episode for 1001 North Roxbury because I wanted to talk to people in advance of the city council meeting. And then I wanted to take bits and pieces from the city council meeting to understand not the why, because the why is immaterial, but the how it happens when there's a property that people love is demolished. And I said then, and I stick to this, I don't care. And I don't mean I don't care like laissez-faire, I don't care, it's their problem, not mine. I mean I don't care because it's not my fight. I don't want to take a side in, all too often, especially with social media today, people will get so angry and so emotional about something for which they have absolutely no business injecting themselves. This is one of those things like 1001 North Roxbury. I don't live in Beverly Hills. I've never lived in Beverly Hills. I don't have I don't have friends who live next to that house or on the same block who are sad by its loss, who are saddened by its demolition. I am empathetic. I am sympathetic. I feel for them. I feel
Mhm.
for their loss, and I'm sorry that they have to go through that. But I don't walk by that house. I don't walk my dog by that house. The loss of that particular home is not impactful in any way, shape, or form in my life, but
Mhm.
it is to others.
Yeah.
And so, as part of the industry of which I consider myself to be a part of, my anger and my issue is with the city council of Beverly Hills in that case. I mean, Erin, they had an attorney. When you buy a piece of property for $49 million for the sole purpose of tearing it down and building something new, you have more money than most, right?
Yeah.
You got a few bucks to throw in a lawyer's direction to go fight this thing. This lawyer stood up, and you can go back and listen to the episode. I'll drop a link to that past episode in the show notes for those who want to go hear it again. This lawyer stood up and in 15 minutes completely dismantled the city's policies, method for how they wanted to view significantly uh, viewed homes or architecture. That architect wasn't really an architect; he was a builder, but it was common for the time, and
Hmm.
he was on a list. He was on a list of properties that were to be saved. Still didn't
Mm.
matter. I mean,
Mm.
nothing mattered because there was no commitment to sustainable architecture. There was no commitment to it. And then what happens is you get all these people who get up in arms and they get crazy. And just because something's old doesn't mean it's worth saving.
Right.
At the same time, to Chris Pratt and his wife, it's like, come on, have a heart, have some empathy for people who love old architecture. And it doesn't mean that you have to change your decision, but like you're saying, you know, George has been on the show, and I love what George does. And he's got a podcast, US Modernist Radio, that is absolutely exceptional for anyone who wants to go, hear more about mid-century modern architecture or modern architecture in general. He's the man. Like, he knows exactly what he's talking about, and I love what he does. He and I have had this conversation too. Just because something's old doesn't mean it needs to be saved, but be a bit empathic to those who feel a certain way. Donate the materials to SciArc or to UCLA or to USC's
Yeah.
architecture pro. Do make a gesture.
Exactly. Well, that's what I said. The LA Times interviewed me, and that's exactly what I said. It was just like I just don't get, it was kind of ruthless, you know, and for someone that claims to be a man of God, it's not very godlike. I mean, to me, you can talk and you can talk the talk, but walking the walk is another story. And I think, you know, taking that path, it's like you I mean, I've been through this a lot. I renovate old houses. I'm working on a couple amazing houses in Montecito that are historical, Spanish revivals. And even though we're very much modernizing them, there's always a nod to what they were. That's very important to me I love, that's my favorite thing to do, actually, to take something very old and give it a new twist. And it's something I know my father would do. I mean, a lot of people renovate these houses and want to do them exactly how they were, which means like, Formica kitchen countertops, which to me are just, I can't stand them. And I know if my father was alive, he would never use that material now. He did it for a reason then. It was affordable, it was available. There weren't nearly as many counter slab options as there are now. So he wouldn't even do it. But people are just, they're like madmen freaks that just want to, completely dial into that time. And I get it. That's one way to do it. They like to create little museums. That's not where I live. I don't know if you read I did an essay in the last book on my father making LA modern that I co-edited. I did a essay called Growing Up with Uncomfortable Furniture. You should read it. It's kind of funny.
You know what? I absolutely will. I absolutely will. I think it's interesting too, to have this conversation and to hear your ideas, formica and materiality of the time. I want your take on this. I feel as though we are entering, this is the beginning of the beginning of the next great golden age of design and architecture. And if you look back at the Spanish flu and the pandemic of 1921, what's so interesting about it is out of the pandemic in the 1920s came Art Deco and this experimentation with Art Deco and sort of a leveling up. Art Deco existed, but it didn't exist to that degree. It was like somebody flung open the barn doors and just let all the horses run. And what they came up with, these ideas of new materials, especially for, not putting porous wood cabinetry in a bathroom, it's probably a good idea. Subway tile introduced into residential design.
Mhm.
It's an interesting idea. People either love or hate subway tile today, but the fact that it's still in use as much as it is more than 100 years later is exceptional.
Right.
Then Art Deco gave way to this rise of a new modernist era. And then this new modernism gave way to mid-century modern, which was a completely different yet similar idea, sort of this different philosophy. If you look back at Wallace Neff, not Wallace Neff, Neutra, and you
Mm.
look at the destruction of the original Neutra family home, which then gave way to the Neutra VDL house in Silver Lake. It was just exceptional to go from this one very, very modern structure, which I believe burned down, and then to replace it with this mid-century modern idea and this aesthetic and this philosophy that was just extraordinary. I can't help but feel like we're at the same moment in time, past his prologue, where you've got something dramatic that basically caused a group rethink from the pandemic, and then coming out of that, new ideas of materiality, sustainability, new ways of living, new ways of life, looking at different ways to do something. I feel like it's extraordinary. And I'm wondering, your take on that, and is it familiar to when you were a child watching your father work?
Um, so it's interesting. As you were talking, I was trying to think, where are we going? Like, what is the next thing. Um, because I'm certainly not seeing any. I mean, I'm working on some massively huge things and some small things, and I know what I would like to see is more of a life is not geared at all for aging, in terms of the way that we live. And I think what would be really great is more communal, lots where there are several. I'm sure you've seen these things. Like I remember reading an article about several couples in Texas that bought a piece of property and put, like six small places on it. Then they share their garden and that makes so much sense to me. I'm surprised we don't see more of that. We just keep creating rules that you can't build too many houses you can't build, you can do one ADU or you can do, I don't understand why we're not opening that up more and allowing more buildings on property and allowing several people to come in and own them and more of a together thing rather than separate. Because the truth is now we're living longer and we're blowing through our money faster and our healthcare system isn't optimal. And then we get older. I mean, my mother lived until 98. My father died at 70 very suddenly, but my mother lived till 98. And it's expensive to age out in this country. Um, and I'd love to see more energy around that. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but this came to me as you were speaking, just thinking, what is the next thing? And I wish the next thing was more of a communal way because I watch my daughter who's 21, thankfully she wants to drive, but a lot of these kids don't want to drive. They don't have a car. They don't want to buy a house. They don't want to get married. They don't want to have kids. They're watching us. They're smart. They see, oh, wow, this is hard. And especially now after all the fires, the homeowners insurance is off the charts. Here in Ojai, I don't know about where you are, but here in Ojai, it's completely unaffordable. So now these people that have been now they're in their 70s and their house insurance has just quadrupled and they can't afford it. They
Yeah,
get
well,
aged out in their later years, and then where are they going to go?
yeah, no, it's true. It's interesting, but to your point, where are we going from here? I think and I want your take on this too, because I do feel like, the ADU conversation would not have happened 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we're not having the ADU conversation. I remember in Los Angeles, some progressive architects doing an example, at a modernism week or one of the events where it's like, here's the modern era small footprint home, and just people scoffing at it and laughing at it. It's like, that's never going to happen. It's almost like, you look back at Wallace Neff and his extraordinary Spanish revival architecture. And then you look at the home he died in. He had this idea for the bubble house,
Mm,
because his idea was, you've got all these GIs returning from World War II and they're going to need a place to live. And so his idea of the bubble house, and you could put hundreds of them in a neighborhood where maybe you could only put dozens of traditional homes.
right.
And that, by the way, that died. And I think it died because of the shape of the bubble house. And I just think it wasn't attractive at the
Mm,
time. But you look at this new era of small architecture and how it incorporates this, the Bauhaus movement and the modern architecture and the mid-century modern architecture of the day. I feel like it's going in the right direction, but it takes too long. I think the housing crisis, you talk about young people not wanting to buy a home, it's the whole millennial conversation, because it took them longer than it did Gen X or other generations, but they want to be in homes now.
mhm.
They're part of the cycle now. They want homes, they want architecture, they want design. Maybe they don't drive, but that passion goes into other things, at least for Gen Y and Z. But I definitely get your point. I feel like the mid-century modern idea is prime for return.
Totally. Yeah. George was just telling me this morning, I was talking to him about something that there's what did he say? He just had read an article in just look this up. I thought this was cool. Uh I think it was in the Wall Street Journal about Linda Cedar Homes starting to make cedar modernist homes. And I think the title of the article was how you can build your very own Frank Lloyd Wright.
Hmm.
So yeah, um I think it is. It's definitely, well, I think it was just a smart way to build. I mean, my father was very much, his whole thing was rectilinear. Why would you build in the way that materials come? Materials come in 4x8 sheets of plywood or whatever. So things should be straight. They should be rectilinear, and then came all this, detailed, lots of curvature, much more romantic kind of stuff. And, it just wasn't to him. Why would you, if you have to alter something and it's so difficult and so much more expensive to do, why would you do that? And often, it's more about taking in what's around you. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these very decorative things are like, look at me, and modern and mid-century modernism isn't necessarily that. Yeah, I mean, you look at it because it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see the beams come all the way outside from the inside and see a wall that carries through the inside out. That's a very lovely thing, but it's very understated. It's not showy. And that was very much his thing. He was very into rectilinear and not into doing any details that were there for no reason. He just liked exposing the reasons, like showing a steel I-beam, exposing it because in his mind it was beautiful, and it is.
I do think it's funny though, that you said, the article is titled, now you can build your own Frank Lloyd Wright. Let's let's hope that doesn't happen. Um, Now, listen, don't get me wrong. I love Frank Lloyd Wright architecture,
Mm.
but it's not flexible at all when it comes to repairs or fixing things. It's hard to try to get to the electrical through inches of concrete. It's the all the built-in furniture is not necessarily comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, the homes with the flat roofs that leak. Um, I think what's really interesting about Frank Lloyd Wright as an architect, as an individual, for anyone who's ever seen the Mike Wallace interview on 60 Minutes, or maybe it was just the Mike Wallace interview with Frank Lloyd Wright, where you get to
Mm.
hear an hour of Frank Lloyd Wright espousing his opinions and views. Wow, I don't know that I would want to be a client of his. Um,
Yeah.
talk
Oh,
about
I've got to
Frank.
see that. I've not seen that, but
You have, what? I'll look for that again, and I'm sure it's on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the show notes. It's fascinating. It's spectacular, but it's an interesting thing. I a few months back, I toured Price Tower. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Price Tower, his one and only skyscraper, is in it's 40 minutes away from me in Bartlesville. And so I went out there, got a tour, did an interview. I mean, really got to go places that were extraordinary. The thing about Frank Lloyd Wright is comfort and use were not really important to him. And that's what I found so extraordinary about that. I'll tell you one story.
it's
In
so
Mr. Price's office, which was the executive office on the 19th floor, where his executive assistant, his secretary, would sit. You have to realize Price Tower is this 20-story structure in the middle of downtown Bartlesville, which probably doesn't have another building that's 6 floors or higher at the time that this is built, right? So you've got views for 50 miles in every direction because it's flat. So you've got views for days. And the executive assistant, her office, her area was just outside of Mr. Price's office. And the area where Frank Lloyd Wright puts her typing station is facing a wall. It's facing a wall because to her left would be Mr. Price so that he could summon her at any moment. To her right would be, and we know Frank Lloyd Wright loved floor to ceiling windows. There were windows, except where she would turn her head to look outside, there was a partition that cuts the window at about 6 feet. So she couldn't be distracted by looking at the view.
That sounds like him. Well,
Doesn't
have
it?
you ever been in any of his, I've been in many of his houses, and
Yeah.
the kitchens, like the
Tiny.
attention to detail in every other part of the house is phenomenal. Then you get to the kitchen, super small, not very functional. I remember being in one and all the, plates on the light switches were beautiful throughout the house. Then you come into the kitchen and they just have like a plastic light switch. Like it didn't get any attention.
Yeah.
It's clear what his thought was towards women. That's for sure.
Well, it's, I agree with you. I think it's deeper than that. It was, hallways, stairways, kitchens, the apartments. And yes, I've been in others that I saw this to be true too, but the there were apartments in Price Tower. And so we went to a couple of the apartments in one model to look at. So the kitchen, now all of them are small by today's standards for an apartment, but everything else had space. The kitchen was, I don't think there was one 90-degree corner in the kitchen. I think you could probably touch both sides from the center.
Pretty much.
And there was, it was unremarkable.
Yeah.
And to your point, and I think that, so as you were growing up, did you see any of the same ideas from your father's architecture, or was the philosophy different? And if so, how have those philosophies as regards to his architecture affected the manner in which you design?
Um, I certainly don't see the ties that we're talking about with Frank Lloyd Wright. I think a lot of his kitchens were kind of galley kitchens. They were long and narrow, which is functional. It wasn't, this is before the time of the open concept. I mean, they were as close to it as an open concept as you could get at the time. They were always near the living space, but they were separated. Um, and they were just very efficient. I think there was a lot of efficiency in my father's work. And that is something I really revere. I don't like things that don't function well. And it's funny that you talked about, the uncomfortableness of like where the secretary was or whatever. I've worked with people that they've just flat out said to me, I don't care how this feels. I just went through this with a client. I don't care what it feels like. I want it to look amazing. I'm like, okay. I'm somewhere in the middle. I matter very much what it feels like because, I'm older now. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to sit on pieces of foam that are, you know, there are some very uncomfortable mid-century modern furniture pieces that I don't enjoy. I don't want to live that way anymore. I spent my childhood like that. So I love comfort and I love finding that place where you can meet because there are more things now that hit on that. They're great designs and they're actually comfortable to sit in. That is very important to me. But younger people don't care so much. They don't mind living in a museum, which is the way I lived. I lived in a museum and I don't want to live that way again. I'm done with that. That chapter's over.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because back to the Price Tower, Frank Lloyd Wright had custom chairs made, and you can see them in some of the video I shot there. And the chairs were cast in Oklahoma, in Bartlesville, by a company that's still in existence today. The same company, I believe, cast the chairs as well as made the ornamental metal, pressed the ornamental metal on the outside of the structure. But what's interesting is these chairs, notoriously uncomfortable, hard to move, hard to place, couldn't take them anywhere else. Yes, they were movable, which is a rarity for a lot of his furniture. But I also learned that he had another furniture line that was only out there for a very short period of time because people weren't buying it because it didn't look like his work,
Hmm.
which I thought was really, really interesting. But to your point, I feel like that's where we're going. I think it's interesting that there are still clients out there who would say, I don't care if it's comfortable. I just wanted to look good. It doesn't totally surprise me, but it is a little bit surprising considering where we seem to be going these days is,
Yeah.
the open floor plan didn't work. Some people still want elements of it, but not the whole house because we realized you can't have, you know, five people in a house with no walls and try to still get some quieter
Well, and the
privacy.
other thing is so many people didn't take into consideration with that. I still love the open floor plan actually, but what you have, it has to be so beautifully designed because if you're walking into seeing three rooms, a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room, you better be neat. And when it's messy, when the kids are got their stuff all over the place and you're cooking in the kitchen and there's people in the living room, it's just way too, you walk into just what I call eye static. So you have to design it in such a way that you can control that. And there are ways. I mean, I've learned over time to deal with it, but that's what people don't get. They don't get that, oh, this is a great idea, the open floor plan, but you have to be neat or it just doesn't look good. Especially if you're walking in the front door to it, which is often the case. I've found I'm working on projects where I walk in the front door and there I am. So you have to do little tricks to divert the eye or just like I said, be neat or a lot less things. I think people are getting better with less things. I think they're realizing you just don't. I think there was a time where, a lot of clutter, a lot of stuff, that's homey. I think homey now for people is getting more open and more clean, than there isn't. I think that comes with social media. I think part of our problems right now with all, the anxiety that everybody's feeling and depression and I guess loneliness is off the charts in terms of being an epidemic. I think we just have way too much information so quickly. We used to, I mean, when I was a kid, I want to know something. I'd have to go to the room that the encyclopedia, the Britannica encyclopedias were, figure out which book it was in, find it, read it, digest that information. Well, that could all take half an hour, an hour. Now it's 47 seconds. And anything you want to know, you can ask Siri and you can have it immediately. That's a lot. That's a lot of weight. And I find as I get older, I need that weight makes me want more openness in everything that I do. I want less things. I want less things to take care of, less things to dust, less things to feed. Like, I want as much simplicity because the information we are being weighed down with, it's real. It's real. It's affecting us in deep, deep ways. So I just do what I can in the world of interiors to lighten people's lives up. I'm not about cluttering. I'm more about, creating a cocoon that gives that soothes, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. So it's funny. I see a lot of you and your trajectory in myself and my trajectory. Different things. Got to find something that keeps us interested. Gotta keep moving the ball forward as far as creative influence. And with that, and you're kind of like, not knowing what's next. What is next for you? I mean, and you may say, I love this design gig and I want to just keep doing what I'm doing, which is great. But at the same time, I have found with many creatives, sitting back and doing what they're doing isn't what they necessarily want to see themselves doing what they're doing in the future. Let's manifest this for a minute. What would you like to be doing?
Hmm. It's a good question again. You have good questions, Josh. I feel I'm doing what I should be doing. What the direction I'm trying to go more into. I take the word, first of all, it took me a very long time to say I was an interior designer. I've never liked that term. So for the longest time, I called myself a spatial therapist because especially when I'm working with a couple, I am a therapist. I mean, there's a lot I need to know. There's a lot I hear. There's a lot of things I watch them disagree on. I have to be a mediator of sorts, but I get in there, and I'm that way anyway. I just go deep fast. I don't fuck around. I'm not, I'm not on that light layer. I ask a lot of questions. I hang out with the people. I often end up friends with them. I just like to work in a very deep way. So I take that term, once I took on interior design, I see it in the way of interior. Like I am trying to help people figure out who they are in essence. And I know I don't mean to sound, that sounds kind of a little, what's the word I want? I don't mean that egotistically or arrogantly. It's more that, when we're in an environment that we feel reflects who we are, we're proud. And when I've seen people that when I've transformed their room, I've watched them kind of change. It's kind of like when you were younger and you got a new haircut and you just like walk differently and you wanted to get some new clothes to go with your haircut. And I just remember that feeling and going, wow, if I'm wearing a certain pair of shoes, I walk completely differently. If I'm in boots, I walk completely differently than I do in heels. Or well, living is the same way. If you live in a different way, it brings out a different part of you. And I love when I watch that transformation. I just worked on a project with a woman who's so wonderful. I'm working on another project for her now. And she's Middle Eastern and she's a Jungian therapist. So everything, there had to be a thread of everything. You don't just go find a rug or a couch. She had to create a story and a map, and the rugs have to come from a certain area in Iran, and they have to have certain colors in them because that has certain meanings, and certain patterns mean certain things, like pomegranates. And then, so you didn't just go buy stuff that looked cool. She had to narrate a story, and I remember working with her on her Berkeley house, which I'm doing now, and I wanted to do a very different kind of color scheme than we did here in Ojai, and it was in greens, and that's not Middle Eastern colors. So she had to develop a story about why it was green and where that came from. And the street is Mount Tam, and she lives near Mount Tam, or the street is Tamalpais. And so Mount Tam is about a frog, something to do with a turtle, I think, and then the turtle's green. And she just creates these stories. And I was like, oh my God, I love that you're doing this. And it was so cool because she taught me something, that to build this story more. Don't just randomly go get stuff, which has never really been my thing anyway, but hers went much deeper. It went to in very Jungian theories and very internal. And her environment is incredibly important to her. And this is where she comes and, recharges. So, yeah, I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm doing. What I want to be doing and what I'm very good at intrinsically doing. And I just want it to go deeper and deeper. And I'd love to bring it into worlds that can afford it, because I feel like everybody needs to feel good about the way that they live. And a lot of people can't go there. And I wish there was a way. I've been trying to think of a way I can give back that way. Because like I said, I think everyone deserves to feel proud of how they live. And I've been trying to find ways to go there. So that would probably be what I would add to what I do.
I love that. I love that. And I cannot express, and by the way, taking the time to come on and talk to me, I think is part of that. So thank you. Thank you for doing
You're
this. I loved
welcome.
our chat. Thank you. Thank you for this.
You're welcome, Josh.
Design Hardware's newly remodeled showroom is where you will find a gallery-style space with a thoughtful display of products, purposefully positioned to allow unbridled exploration and discovery. High-end faucets, luxury tile, natural stone, wood floors, and bespoke hardware selections are presented in a holistic manner, strategically arranged to stimulate creativity and transition your vision from the conceptual stage to a fully realized space. Conveniently located, free parking available. Stop by to find your inspiration. Collect samples, get expert advice, and tackle everything on your shopping list all in one place. Visit them online at designhardware.com or in the real world, 6053 West 3rd Street in Los Angeles.
Erin, thank you for the time and sharing your extraordinary journey. Amazing. If you were a bit surprised that Erin is not mad about the Zimmerman house and its destruction, I was too. That is, until I heard her rationale. Then I understood. And I get it. Thank you to my amazing partner sponsors, Thermosol, Design Hardware, TimberTech, Pacific Sales, and Monogram. Your support for the design industry is strong and lasting. And for that, I thank you. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this show. Thank you for listening, downloading, and sharing the show with friends and colleagues who you think might enjoy it as well. And for your emails, God, I love your emails. Keep them coming. Convo by Design at outlook.com with guest suggestions and show ideas. I absolutely love them. And follow along on Instagram, Convo by Design with an X. I'm looking forward to next week and another story about sublime design and sharing it with you. Until then, be well and take today first.